Basically, the whole interview will have 4 sections. The one about your personal background a little bit, one about education, one about your music and recording sessions, and one about your lifestyle, which is a little bit about, time management, maybe talking about some injuries, maybe tips that you heard,
Sure.
and so on and so forth. So the first one, I read that you were from Seattle, from Washington. So
Yeah. So yeah, I grew up near Seattle. I was born in California originally.
Okay.
I mean, not originally, but I guess originally because that is my origin.
Uh-huh.
It's not like my birthplace changed after I was born. I was born in California, and then I grew up like from the age of 3 or so until 13 or 14, I lived on an island called Whidbey Island, a little bit north of Seattle.
Well, you went to Washington University. Did you meet Miles Okazaki there?
I didn't know Miles Okazaki from that. I met Miles, I'm trying to place when it was. He grew up very close to me. He grew up in Port Townsend, Washington.
Yes, Port Townsend, yeah.
Yeah, he grew up in Port Townsend, which is just a short ferry ride from the island where I grew up on. But I didn't know him out in Seattle. I got to know him pretty quickly in New York. I can't recall whether he was a teacher already or if he was a student at the School for Improvised Music. Maybe I met him at dance. I can't remember where it was. It was at one workshop or another. And actually, his music and like had a very early influence on me. Some of his writing was some of the first times that I'd encountered much odd meter music, and as well as like really heavy literary references. I just remember that there was a song of his I think it was called "The Garden of Forking Paths" or something like that, which it was related to a piece of fiction by Borges, and it definitely was some of the early inspiration for one of my first pieces that I tried writing in a weird meter, which was called "On the Verge" on that first Terence record that I was on. So that's neither here nor there, but yeah, I didn't know Miles in Seattle, but I got to know him in New York.
The reason why I was asking about that Seattle background is I would like to know what kind of music scene you were involved when you were in Seattle. What kind of music, you were enjoying, you were hanging out, maybe what was the mainstream music, in Seattle? Was it punk?
The mainstream music in Seattle when I was growing up was apparently that was around the grunge kind of time, Nirvana and stuff like that. But I lived in a little bubble, I grew up on the island, and I mostly listened to. So my parents played a lot of folk music and world music and classical, and some stuff, I guess, like Enya that you would, I guess, consider new age music and things like that. All of that was the music of my childhood. That was what was playing around the house. And sometimes like some oldies like Beach Boys and stuff like that, and the Beatles. We listened to all that kind of stuff. And then it was, I started listening to jazz pretty much when I started playing it. Because I had a teacher who, because I started improvising on the piano before I knew anything about what really jazz or improvisation was. And so I was just improvising and like doing some I tell a story all the time, but I was trying to imitate the sounds of a thunderstorm on the piano. And I would perform that in public, my little piece called Storm Cycle. And that was cool. I put that like in the talent show, and it was very abstract. It was like, to the lay person's ear, it would sound a lot more like Cecil Taylor than it does like any other type of more mainstream type of, jazz piano playing. That's where I started. And then, after a while of that, my parents were like, well, maybe you want to take lessons. Maybe that'd be good. I think maybe to spare themselves as well from having to hear the total chaos that I was creating on the instrument. And so then, from there, I had a lesson with a teacher who basically was like, so you like to improvise. The style of music where you improvise most that I know about is jazz. And so that was my introduction. And then I started listening to it. And I was very straight ahead jazz guy then for years. Ray Brown Trio, and with Gene Harris especially, but then also the versions of the trio with the younger piano players like Benny Green and then Jeff Keezer. That was my favorite band. And honestly, once I fell, and then I discovered other things from there, Keith Jarrett, of course, Herbie Hancock, McCoy Tyner. I went through a crazy McCoy Tyner phase. I used to try to sound a lot like McCoy, I should say, in a way that you don't really hear very much of in my playing these days, but it's still hanging out in there every once in a while. But all of this, and then so I was studying that and listening to a lot of jazz, and then also I was playing classical bassoon at the time. I had started that at around the same time as piano.
Okay. Well, how did you find the interest in bassoon?
I found the interest in bassoon because I was a weird kid, and they passed out the list of the instruments by name, and I wanted to pick the one that had the weirdest sounding name. I thought, bassoon. Wow, that sounds weird. And then it was weird, and it was really hard. But I got good at it. I liked the instrument, and I got really good at playing it. I came in second place in this concerto competition when I was 15 or something like that. And that meant that I was supposed to perform the piece with the orchestra live. The top two winners performed the piece with the orchestra, and then as soon as I had that chance to as a soloist, a bassoon concerto, as soon as I had won that thing, and then I had the prospect of playing it live, I was like, I don't want to do that. And I also, had grown a little tired of making reeds, because that instrument you basically have to be a woodworker as well to just have the right materials to even make a decent sound. And in the meantime, the piano is sitting over there, just ready to be played. So my laziness got the better of me, and the piano is the one that stuck.
Well, what would you say is the most important moment in your education?
Oh, I've had a lot of very important moments in my education. I'd say each of there's a lot of different stages of education. As far as my piano teachers go, the thing that was the most useful for me, that I'm not sure would be blanket useful for other students, but for me, what was the most useful was that my teachers always, rather than telling me this is what you need to do, this is what you're going to practice, my teachers always asked me what I was interested in. I got very weirdly lucky in that regard. I mean, and, you know, some of that's due to the fact that I was just very curious, and I had a lot of questions. But also, I was lucky that the teachers that I ended up with did not have a dogmatic approach of, like, this is how you learn to play the piano. And for my development, I think that was crucial. You know, and also the fact that they didn't force me to learn how to read music at an early age. You know, I learned to read music much later. I learned to hear and understand the theory of harmony and to, like, play a little bit closer to what I hear long before I could really read, especially treble clef. I could read bass clef for bassoon, but I'd never learned the treble clef for piano until much later. Let's see. So that was really huge, actually, for me. Just having teachers who had an open-minded and fluid and, like, very kind of, like, symbiotic approach to teaching rather than a top-down approach. I think that really gave me the opportunity to develop in my own way, you know? I mean, the other things that, and, you know, other things that were really key, the lessons that I had, I mean, so that principle holds through all of the teachers that I had. My very first teacher on the island, I think her name was Barbara Dunn. And then I started studying with a guy in Seattle named Merle Allen Sanders. And then at the University of Washington, when I went there, I studied with Mark Seals. All of them operated with that same approach in one way or another. While also dropping little bits of wisdom, you know. Mark, in particular, talked to me about the importance of motivic development when building a solo. And then when I got to New York, I learned a lot with the lessons with Kenny Barron at Manhattan School of Music. Those were just two pianos in the room and him basically teaching me tunes by ear. So every week we just played tunes by ear, and he never told me anything about what I should be doing, right or wrong. Like, he just very rarely, just like I learned by osmosis a bit more, you know. Also had very valuable lessons with Fred Hirsch. Talking about touch, talking about like surprise and density. I mean, I had a lot of I got to study with Joanne Brackeen as well, a bit, as well as with George Cables here and there at some of the summer workshops. And then definitely the teacher who for me made the biggest impact on my life was definitely a woman named Sophia Rosa.
Was she a classical pianist?
She's a classical pianist, but she also taught many jazz musicians. She taught Fred Hirsch for 30 years. She taught Barry Harris for like 30 years as well. And she talked a lot about emotional rhythm. And she talked a lot about just the physicality of playing the instrument and having the rhythm come from your body rather than from your mind. And finding, she just had a pretty holistic approach to piano playing. And I came to her because, you know, some of the lucky things about my method of education were that I had the chance to find things out for myself. The unlucky things about it were that I developed certain bad habits physically, some of which led to injury. you know? So there was a period in my, like, early 20s, I would say, where I started to encounter something along the lines, I'm still not clear whether it was exactly carpal tunnel or tendinitis, but some kind of repetitive motion issue. Yep. And a number of people recommended that I study with Sophia, and so that's why I started to go to her.
How did you treat it? How did you treat
it? I treated that injury with the lessons with her for the most part. I went to a couple of doctors just seeing if I needed to do any type of surgery. It was too risky. I did occasional massage. I did some acupuncture now and then. But the biggest thing was actually just addressing the root cause, which had to do with my posture at the piano, and had to do, and in particular, there were things that I were doing with my shoulders like raised up and like wiggling my shoulders around a lot. That was causing problems for my hands and wrists. And she figured out like ways to teach me how to conserve energy. I still move a lot when I play, but I don't move in the same ways that damage me that they used to.
Well, from the method that you mentioned, that you're very self-sufficient in terms of creating your own methods, how to learn yourself, right? If you were in a position when you were a teacher or an instructor in a school and you were asked what is the instructional material every piano player should have in their collection, is there anything you would recommend? Because it's a little bit outside of your box, but maybe there's a standard of books that people use for teaching around New York or for teaching jazz.
I don't know if there's a standard of books for I came up and I learned a lot of things from the Mark Levine jazz piano book.
Yep.
When I worked through that and I learned some things through there. I also was lucky though, because I had a teacher who taught it to me not as gospel, but just as like, well, here's some stuff. Look around in here and see what's useful. Yeah. This isn't the way to do things. I think that Barry Harris's approach is very, very smart and makes a lot of sense. And I think that that's something that is very valuable for almost any like piano player who wants to play in this music that we call jazz or Black American music or whatever it's called. His philosophies are very worthwhile to study and make a lot of sense. I personally feel that I'm glad that I sort of came to them late, because I was able to use them rather than be completely like feeling trapped by them. I mean, like I don't know if there's like a standard of what you need. I've got my favorite books. I've got the books which mean a lot to me. I love for an education book, Rand Blake. Do you know the piano player Rand Blake? I don't. He made some. He's still around. He's very eccentric kind of guy who has made his own style. He made a record called "The Newest Sound Around," like back in the '60s, with a singer named Gene Lee. And he wrote a book called "Primacy of the Ear." Primacy of the Ear. That book is very useful for like finding your own constellation of influences that you want to chart your course by. There's a book, Free Play, which I think is very, very good. Nachmanovich, I think, is the guy's name who wrote it.
Okay, I'll check it out.
And then as far as like a theory book goes, I really love this book called Harmonic Experience by W.A. Matthew, which basically teaches you to like play and basically learning to hear harmony from its origins in just intonation rather than well-tempered intonation. So you can really feel what an actual third feels like, etc., etc., etc. So there's lots of materials, lots of stuff that I love. I don't know what a bass line is for, like if you have a good rhythm and a good sound, you can kind of get away with anything. Most of all, if you have a good rhythm and a good sound and some kind of point of view, you don't need to have like a original concept, but just like, your own, allowing your own outlook on the world and on life to just emerge. And then that doesn't mean like I'm going to force my concept on everything, but just, good sound, good rhythm, be able, like a decent enough ability to either read songs fairly quickly or to be able to hear them and internalize them very quickly.
You're pretty much now defining a very important set of skills for music students, and then subsequently for professional musicians, which is fantastic.
Oh, for sure.
Are there any false assumptions or misunderstandings that pitfalls that usually students kind of make?
I think some of the pitfalls for students, some of the pitfalls can be when you're feeling like you're trying to do everything at once. If you've ever met a drummer who has a business card who plays all styles, I'm like, no, you don't. What does that like? I think that there's value in specializing, at least short-term specializations, like go deep into something for a little while, rather than trying to necessarily become like somebody who could do every gig. I think that learning to be proficient on, like, learn some technique on your instrument enough to help you get around, and say something close to what you want to say. But don't try to be all things to all people. I would say that. I would say, some of the pitfalls in education as well, so Nietzsche has his idea of the development of the artist, right?
I haven't read it, but
there's a very, very wonderful book, actually, I'm sort of paraphrasing Nietzsche as paraphrased or rewritten by the poet Jane Hirschfield in a book that she wrote called Nine Gates. There's a chapter in there called The Question of Originality, which is just remarkable. And so Nietzsche talks about the 3 stages of artistic development. The first is that of the camel. The camel is where you like enter into tradition. You learn how things have been done. You learn to be like a craftsperson. You learn the rules. Here's all the theory. Here's how things are done. Here's how to play your 2-5-1s, right? Like, here's your approach notes, whatever, I think a lot of people learn all the rules, and then you learn the rules, and then you're like, great, I've done it. I'm an artist. And they stop there, and there's no problem with that. But you're stuck in a certain zone.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
The next phase is the phase of the lion. The lion, this is a lion that, So imagine that there's a dragon here that has on every scale on his body, there's like a commandment: thou shalt not, thou shalt not play minor ninth in the inside of a chord voicing. Thou shalt not move parallel fifths or whatever. And so this lion takes down the dragon. Every rule that's ever been given to you, you question it, you examine it, you think about it for yourself, you find your own perspective and your own approach through it, right? A lot of people get to this phase as well, and they're like, woo, I've made it. I've got an original voice now. I've learned the rules, and now I'm breaking them, and I don't need to follow any of them. I'm not going to follow any rules. That itself is another potential pitfall, because you can become just as stuck there as you can be stuck in the first stage. Because in that stage, you sort of like over-glorify your rebelliousness, and you're not allowed, you don't allow yourself to play things that might be obvious, and that might be, yes, they might be the traditional thing, but maybe they're the correct thing in this moment, you know? So then the final stage, as he describes it, is then that of the child, who, having done all of this learning and unlearning, having learned the rules and broken the rules, then you kind of almost forget that there is any rules. And it's not like you're ever able to totally forget. You know, having gone through those processes are both necessary. But then everything is allowed in this last stage. And you can really start to discover with an innocence that is enhanced by the intellectual rigor that has preceded it. So, yeah.
Well, in relation to what we are talking right now, you know, pitfalls and student's life, do you remember when you were a student and there was a peer pressure that you had your own expectations from yourself? There were expectations from people around you, why they hired you for particular gigs, such and such. Competition, maybe even your own doubts. Were you able to absorb all these negative influences well, or did you cope well with this kind of pressure? And
for the most part, I did my best. You know, I think that, you know, you hit the nail on the head earlier on, because I did have such a celebrated youth. You know, and like from a young age, everybody was telling me how special and talented I was, and I think the hardest thing for me was always my own expectations, which started to, you know, you start hearing how special you are all the time, and you start to think that there's something like inherently special about you. It can be, or that like you're just supposed to be amazing all the time. You know, and then sometimes I would play and I'd be like, this is some bullshit. I'm a fraud. You know, like, yeah, it's like, so that has you know, early talent has a danger of burnout unless you like temper it with some like real humility and remembering that, I mean, remembering a lot of things, but remembering first of all that, like, that this is a learning planet, basically. Actually, you know, just in general, I mean, that's one of the things that I feel very lucky about, that I had the opportunity. You know, like, I mean, I was, you know, sort of like a pretty celebrated young musician, but I didn't start. I mean, I played gigs on my own in Seattle, but I really made a priority to try to seek out sideman work, because I knew that I needed to learn a lot more. I knew that I needed to learn a lot more, and I knew that the only way that I was going to get that was to play in other people's bands. But yeah, those like the you know, like the ego manifests in many different ways. You know, it can show up as, you know, the normal sort of like full of yourself kind of approach. And it can also show up in the self-doubting kind of approach as well. You know, and they're both, you know, it took me a while to realize that the self-doubt, like, oh, you know, that is itself just another form of egotism. It's like me feeling bad about how I played, or like judging myself for how I played all the time. And especially like being like, you know, sometimes you can feel like you're only as good a person as your last gig was. And so you'd come off the stage and, you know, play a gig where you didn't feel good and just feel terrible. But the fact is that that's just because you feel like you're supposed to be amazing. And like, that's just a weird flip side of ego. And it's, you know, one of the things I've definitely gotten better with, especially, you know, getting into my 30s, is it's not detachment, but it's like non-attachment, or at least, if not non-attachment, definitely light attachment. You know, where it's not that I'm like, oh, everything's good, nothing makes me feel bad. You know, if I play a gig and I'm not happy with how I'm playing, I'll try to understand why and what I can do to improve that. But I don't take it personally in the same way.
Absolutely, yeah.
That's so much easier to say than to do. I'm not sure that I don't know of any shortcut for that other than time. Maybe, but I think that it can be good for people who are going through those periods of like self-doubt and, you know, the bouncing back and forth between self-confidence and self-flagellation, to know that it does get better, you know, like, at least I think it does, you know.
Would you say now that, you know, we cannot detach ourselves from ego, so it's very nice what you just said, that you don't take it personally. You figured out how to learn with it, maybe how to analyze it to a point when you can benefit from it, when you find out what it didn't happen, you know, at the gig. Did you develop any other hobbies or interests now in your 30s that, you know, get you through a day and you actually enjoy doing? I'm talking reading books, sports, meeting with people, social life.
Man, yeah, I mean, I'm a human being. I love all of that shit, you know? Like, I'm definitely not like a practice fiend in general. I mean, you know, I go through different phases where different things capture my attention for a while. I had a period where I used to like really drawing a lot, you know? I have my little obsessions. I like taking pictures, and especially for some reason of doors.
Oh, doors.
You know?
I read it and I saw it. But, you know, you actually take a picture of a really nice door. You know, it's not a door you see. I you know, so like that's part of, like, I've developed a weird eye for that and just an obsession with it. Right now I'm finding myself wanting to learn a lot more about trees. I just read a really great book called The Overstory, which dealing with relationships with, you know, humans and trees, and just trees and trees in general. It's really one of the most powerful books of fiction I've read in many years. And yeah, I'm just finding myself wanting to learn more about that. I love watching movies, you know. I watch stand-up comedy. I love cooking meals with friends, you know. I go through different phases. I used to do juices, do fresh juice at home, and try to find different creative combinations of ingredients to put in there. What was the weirdest ingredients that you put into it?
Weirdest ingredient? Well, usually the weirdest ingredients are things that I would save to put in at the end. There are different types of like resins from trees, from different I can't remember the name of it right now. There's this weird, very sticky, like black sap kind of thing that I would mix into the juice, and it just made it taste like dirt, but in a really nice way.
Yeah.
I also like all sorts of different medicinal mushrooms, like the chaga, lion's mane,
Okay.
and what's the other one? Cordyceps is great for like physical energy. So, and then so as far as exercise, I go through different phases of it. I didn't develop a very good regimen, or just like have a growing up. I was always I think my folks prioritized my learning with my mind and like being expressive and creative, and sort of just wanted to make sure that I didn't turn into some sort of little jock or something. But maybe they did that at the expense of me really having a chance to develop those habits early on. So I'm trying to develop them later in life with mixed results. My girlfriend helps me with that though. She's good. So I've got my gym membership. I go and I run and do a little bit of lifting and use some of the machines. Every once in a while we'll go to a class. So
okay, so the next section could be about your recordings. You can add anything you like, the information about Invisible Cinema or about your latest album.
For Invisible Cinema, well, the first time, like, a little known fact about Invisible Cinema is, well, maybe it's not that little known, but a tour that I did with Eric Harland in Japan.
Okay. He's a drummer.
He's the drummer on Invisible Cinema. Yeah. He put together a tour in Japan, and he put together Matt Penman playing bass, who plays bass on Invisible Cinema, and Kurt Rosenwinkel on guitar, and me. And so that was his quartet. That was the first time that and he invited me to bring a couple of tunes of mine in. There were two of my tunes which were brand new at the time, Praise and Peaceful Warrior. And also we played Afterglow, but with the band. That's the closing solo piano track on Invisible Cinema. And that band rocked my world. That was the first time I heard the melodies with piano and guitar together, and really could feel what it felt like hearing some of those tunes of mine. That band just really felt kind of just really powerful, and like felt like something fresh to me. And it got me addicted to that sound of guitar and piano together. And originally, this is the little known thing, which is that Kurt Rosenwinkel was supposed to be on the record, Invisible Cinema.
All right. Okay.
Yep. And he was scheduled to be on the record until about 2 weeks before the recording session. And then some stuff happened with the labels, and things didn't come together exactly right. And we got Mike Moreno, who's great and did an awesome job. But yeah, the original. So that was a situation where we rehearsed a lot of some of that music, maybe 2 or 3 times before the session. But like, and I had some somewhat specific drum parts for Eric. A lot of the time, what I really had was almost every tune I had a reference track. I was like, the drum beat is coming out of this vibe, and I'd play him this track, and I'm like, now do your thing with that. So it might be a track by Prefuse 73, might be MIA. I had lots of different reference points. But that record, we had never played any gigs as a band before making it. And we only played one gig as a band after making it.
All right. And I believe then, was it in standard? Did you play in the standard? Where did you launch it? Did you?
I played the jazz standard, but not with the same band from the record.
All right.
I toured that music, with various constellations, but I only once played with the exact lineup from the record, and it ended up being at the Winter Jazz Fest. We were supposed to play at like 1 a.m. and it ended up playing at 3 a.m. Like 2009 maybe.
Do you remember what was your approach in terms of order, how to start recording this music? Did you say to yourself, "Oh, let's take these most challenging one first," or you just dig into it and within 1 day or 2 days you put everything together?
We did it. We had 3 days in the studio for that record, and
what was the studio? What is it? A System 2?
No, we recorded at Brooklyn Recording.
Brooklyn Recording, okay.
Yeah, with an engineer named Andy Taub, and we most of the first day, a lot of the first day depends on the studio, but at this particular studio and in this instance, a lot of the first day is just eaten up by trying to get the sound right, set up, and I think from Invisible Cinema, we only have one track on the record that was recorded on day one, which is NEMESIS. So we did that track basically on the first day of the session. And I think we tried a few other things, but we didn't keep anything from that day, except for NEMESIS. As far as like the process of which tunes to play where, I always try to have some sort of balance. I want to have something which is sort of just like good to go and simple to start. Just like we all know what to do. Let's because we might be still fiddling around with our headphone mixes and getting comfortable.
Absolutely.
Let's not do something extra hard right at the beginning. Let's try to ease on into it, get ourselves comfortable first, and then try to get a flow. I have, there's different approaches at different times. I've done other sessions where I'll basically run through I'll record the whole set a few times, basically, and then just choose from there.
Well, how do you like laying out your band when you're in a studio? Because you're a piano player, you've got quite limited, movement, with your body. So how do you like setting these guys up?
Well, let's see. I mean, the most important thing definitely is eye-line communication. For me, for the kinds of records like Invisible Cinema and the newest one, Little Big, there's a fair amount of post-production that goes into it as well, and I need isolation with the drums in order to, in particular the drums and also guitar, in case we want to change anything about the tone, and in case, just to be able to really have all of our options available. Having people in isolated booths for these records has been pretty key, but then that becomes a little bit trickier to be able to make sure that we can all have eye contact. The latest record, Little Big, we did that in a slightly funny way because we recorded basically the piano, bass, drums trio first.
Without a guitar?
Without guitar. We overdubbed the guitar 2 months later.
That's Greg, is it?
Greg Toohey, yep.
Yep.
And we, it worked out, I mean, just schedule-wise, we were having a hard time figuring everything out, and also the studio that we recorded at, called Strange Weather, in Brooklyn, there wasn't a really great option for another booth for his guitar amp to go to.
Okay.
So we really, I mean, basically, it was sort of a little bit by necessity, and also it ended up also being cool in that we got our rhythm section takes and found something that was feeling good, and then we were able to really zero in and dial in the guitar sound, like specifically for each tune, and try things out and find what really felt like it made it work.
When you're mixing and mastering, sorry, go on.
Yeah.
When you're mixing and mastering these, I suppose you're the main person that is listening to it and has got the final say to it. Mm-hmm. What kind of sound are you looking for, in that band, or in terms of balancing them out? What is it that you hear in your head that you're focused on the most, maybe? What kind of sound you like?
I'm focusing mostly on how it feels in my body.
Okay.
Like, whether it's making me feel like I want to dance or sway, or whether it's just making me feel like, oh, well, this is some cool stuff that's happening. When I'm mixing in particular, and even with the piano sound, like there's a certain range of the piano that hits you in your chest. A certain area in the low mids, which you're like, you just feel it in some kind of way. And if that's missing, then it doesn't. For me, it doesn't feel like my sound.
That's a great answer. That's a great answer.
And then for the drums, I tend to like the drums a little bit drier, and have more of the reverb and the ambience coming from other instruments like the synths or the piano, which has its own, the sustain pedal can create its own dream machine, and then guitar as well. I mean, and that's using reference points from some of my favorite producers in electronic and rock alternative kinds of music. You listen to the way that Nigel Godrich mixes stuff for Radiohead or for many of the other artists that he produces, and the drums have a very present, dry sound compared to a more wet environment, and that's something that I really like.
Do you use any software at home for writing music? Sibelius and LIX like that?
I use Sibelius for notation. I don't use it to write music. I mean, in general, my process for writing music is typically it's mostly that I play solo piano over and over again, working it out until I have it exactly right, and then I write. I only write music down for me mostly once it's written completely, and then I'll start tweaking it after that. But I have primarily most of the time I'm writing making lots of voice memos so I don't forget, but trying to just keep it in my head, and then I'll write it out much later. I've been some of my recent songs in the last few years I've been writing along with a drum machine. So I'll program a drum beat, make some drum beat.
Do you do it in Pro Tools or?
No, I have an actual drum machine. I can't remember which company makes it, but I program the drum machine and just set up a loop, and then come up with chords to go with it, like that. I mean, every song's different. The song like Aquarium from Little Big, that song started, I had my record player on, and I was playing some record, and it reached the end. And at the end of the record, it was like hitting the end of the record. It started going, started making this little repetitive sound, and I was like, whoa, that's cool. And then I just heard it as a drum beat, and I started playing some chords along with that. I used the skipping record player as my drum machine. for some of my other tunes, so I still have it. I don't use it very much, but I have a Roland 88 key keyboard workstation.
Mm-hmm.
They're called the Phantom.
The Phantom.
And I would sometimes make multi-track demos of tunes. So like NEMESIS. I had the chords and the drum beat, but it took me a long time to come up with the melody. And I came up with the melody by basically creating a rhythm section track of the chords and the bass and everything like that, and then improvising over that until the melody started to emerge.
It's a very dramatic movie. Your music is very scenic. It's very dramatic. You can imagine a movie, being run alongside you guys playing, and a lot of
cool.
A lot of your recordings are actually like that. It's part of your melodic playing. I really like that about that.
Oh, well, thanks, man. Yeah, I think that that drama and that immersiveness is something that's key to me, and especially as I'm getting older and zeroing in more and more on what I'm trying to do, getting a little bit more clarity. I'm also feeling like I like creating a sense of place is just as important as the context, as like the content, I should say. The context is almost as important, is just as important as the content. So it's like, I'd rather create a scenario where it feels like you're walking into the woods inside of a song, and you're just noticing all the little things that are around you. And it's not like there's necessarily one thing, which is like, okay, here's the killing solo that has your full attention. I'd rather have it be like an environment where there's lots of things and not one thing is the main focus. They're all playing their role together.
NEMESIS, as a name, where does it come from? Did you pick it up from a book? It's not a very common name that we use in everyday language, and maybe Sherlock Holmes would have his nemesis, right? Like John Moriarty.
Yeah, of course. Well, actually, strangely enough, it's from science. Basically, yeah, it's a theoretical dwarf star that was thought to be a companion to our sun. It was basically like an
from a solar system
anti-sun. Yeah, an anti-sun, that they had a hypothesis that maybe this like weird brother/sister to our sun was somewhere out there and was affecting the gravitation of objects in our solar system. So it had to do with astronomy more than like a person who you really don't like. That
recording itself, you mentioned probably the first time you played it was with Kurt Rosenwinkel, right? On a guitar.
The first I played not that song. I played Peaceful Warrior, Praise, and another song. But I never actually played NEMESIS with Kurt for making that record. We played it with him after. I played it with his band some of the time. There's a really nice version. Maybe my favorite recorded version of that song is the version from like a live bootleg in Paris with Kurt playing it and Ted Poor playing drums.
I'll check it out.
That's a really great one.
That's a really great one. I like the one with Mike Marino and with your band, and I think that was in standard.
Oh, that's great too, yeah. I mean, I also like the little production on that, the Mellotron playing like the flute sounds in the background.
Yeah.
The glockenspiel that comes in. That took me so long to do, the glockenspiel, because I'm really bad at playing glockenspiel, apparently. I did it on a real glockenspiel. It's not a sample, but I was not very good at it, and especially because you have to mute the notes when you want them to stop ringing, and I was not good at doing that.
Well, on your latest concerts with Little Big, you are using Fender Rhodes, you're using piano, and also you got a synth on the top of that?
Yep. I've got a laptop that I'm running some, at the moment I'm running soft synths through there.
Uh-huh.
Repro One is my program of choice for lead sounds, and I'm still pretty new to the synth game. I've got a lot to learn, but I'm excited. I'm enjoying it.
When you go on tour, what instruments do you take with you? And what instruments would you expect that the venue can provide for you?
It really depends on the context. I don't expect. I expect that they're going to provide a piano. You know, that's first of all, and then depending on which band I'm with, some bands we request a Rhodes if we need that, or sometimes it might be a Wurlitzer. Aside from that, I bring my own keyboard controller and my laptop if I need that for the gig that I'm playing. You know, some gigs are just piano.
You were here in Dublin.
These days, I don't travel with mics right now. I would like to start doing that to have a little bit more of a say in what the piano sounds like.
If you get a phone call, or when you get a phone call, let's say from musicians such as Kurt Rosenwinkel, and says, we're going to go on tour, this is the repertoire, how do you approach learning that repertoire?
Well, first of all, I try to see if there's any demos available or if there's any recordings of the music. I'll listen to it a lot of times while reading the chart that has been sent. You know, what I try to do is I try to just spend as much time with it as I have the time to do. You know, if there's like, that's really it. You know, just spend a lot of time with the music. I don't know that there's much more secret than that. But I try to. I mean, I might do the same things with it that I would do when I'm trying to learn any song, which is, you know, to break it down to its rhythmic components and things like that. I mean, I've got a whole master class where I talk about my method of teaching and things like that.
Is it on Elite Mentor?
Yeah, the Elite Music Mentor. I break down my whole process of all of that there. And but long story short, I'm taking the rhythms of the left hand and right hand, putting them in my hands and feet, tapping it out, putting the rhythms, like activating them in my body, learning to sing the different parts a bit, and then sometimes like working through the chords and the harmony very, very, very slowly, and then also modulating, transposing the song to different keys, even if we're only going to ever play it in that other key, because you really learn the harmony of the song transposing it. You start to find new passageways, and you stop thinking of it as just, okay, this is E major to E flat 7 altered to G major. It starts to become more about movement, you know? Yeah.
Well, Aaron, towards the conclusion, do you have any words of wisdom that, imagine we are students in the 4th year leaving the college, and we are shaking our hands, and, you know, we are off to go to the world. Any piece of advice that you would give to musicians?
Let's see. Like, that's a good question, and I've got a number of answers for it. It's like, try to like music doesn't need you. I know that sounds like music doesn't need you. Music is fine. Music's fine. You're welcome to join music if you would like to, you know? If you think of it in that perspective, like it becomes a lot simpler. It's not like, oh my God, I need to make my imprint on music. No, you don't. Music's fine. Like, but join it. Try to be a good person as best as you can. Allow yourself to fuck up in life and in music, both. But also, but you know, try to bring some hopefully useful vibrations to the world. Like, but all with the perspective of that, of joining something that's already there. Not like, I need to do this. You don't need to do this. You don't need to make music. You can join music. You know?
That is absolutely fantastic answer, Aaron. It's really great.
Well, cool, man. Well, hope that this helps out.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Aaron.
All right, Peter.
Okay.
Pleasure to speak with you.
Pleasure to speak to you too. Bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.